Hello, my name is Todd Pittman, and I am the CEO at Anexinet. I'm thrilled you are joining the Forum 2020 remote conference, and I am happy to welcome you and to introduce our next speakers. Anexinet is proud to once again be taking part in such an idea-rich and informative event that features real-world experiences of industry and thought leaders. In the next session, you'll hear a distinct theme of challenge and adaptivity, something I think we can all agree we've had to embrace in both our personal and professional lives over the past few months. Anexinet is no stranger to these themes. We help companies meet their digital challenges head-on to overcome operational and technical roadblocks, to better leverage data and analytics to create improved digital experiences for our clients, employees, and customers. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce our next speakers, who are both highly respected technology experts. Peter Coffey, the Vice President of Strategic Research at Salesforce, and Forrester's own Vice President and Principal Analyst, Liz Herbert. Together, they will underscore the importance of adaptivity and explain how data can be better used for a positive influence on your organization's behavior. However, before I turn it over to Peter and Liz, let me encourage you to stay connected with Forum On-Demand series, as well as the Forum Live on October 7th and October 14th. And now, here are Liz and Peter.
Hey, and welcome to another of our fantastic sessions that we're doing, what I'm calling Blasts from the Past, as we bring our forum experience this year to you online. I'm Peter Coffey with Salesforce, and I'm joined today by Liz Herbert, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester. And Liz was with us in 2017 as a moderator, a speaker. She and I did a Regis and Kelly opening for the day. It was difficult to believe that it's been 3 years. And Liz, you know, the compression of time this year is something everyone's been commenting on. And one of the things I'm asking people is, you know, if you had a friend who'd gone off on a monastic retreat and they'd been in Tibet for the last 6 months, they just got back and they were looking around saying, oh my gosh, what happened? Well, if you only had 3 minutes to kind of get them caught up, what would you pick as the most important things they need to understand have happened in these last few months? Because I think this kind of a recap of remind ourselves, what weren't we thinking in December? What are the realities that we all really need to have our heads wrapped around and not get numb to them, but really focus on them? What are some of the things that would come to mind for you?
Sure. So to me, clearly the pandemic, which is one of the worst pandemics in the history of mankind, and certainly in the last 100 years, would be the key focal point. And for me, when I look at what's gone on in the last several months, you know, I see some optimistic elements, but also obviously a lot of challenges that got exposed. So, you know, first of all, with regard to the pandemic, what we see is that tracking and understanding and data around what was happening was lagging or lacking, if you want to call it that. You know, we had a lot of indications that we see in hindsight way back in the fall of 2019 that took far too long for anybody to get exposed to or understand. Second, what we saw is that companies and governments and individuals had very different cadences and patterns in terms of how they adapted. And, you know, being at Forrester, that's really the name of the game. I mean, our key motto is be bold. And what we try to help our clients with is to be adaptive. And so, you know, when you look at how different, you know, here in the US, different states or even different cities, like where I live in Massachusetts, my city of Cambridge took different steps than our state took. And there's reasons for that. Similarly, in New York, we're more densely populated. You know, Western Massachusetts wouldn't be the same. And you see the same in the corporate world. Some companies took dramatic action quickly, like Salesforce, you know, very quickly pulled people out of offices, very quickly took precautions. Other companies did not. And then, you know, if you look at the different cities and states, you see some were very lax about it. Now we're looking at Texas, Florida, other states who didn't take such an aggressive approach. They're now facing the rise in cases and some of the challenges that other states were dealing with months ago. So, you know, if I were catching someone up who had just come back from some excursion and was living under a rock for all these months, I would highlight to them that that is, you know, clearly the most important thing going on right now, not only for economics, but also for health and obviously those are both extremely critical elements of our society. And highlight to them that it's actually exposed a lot of weaknesses, like toilet paper. Who would have thought we could be fighting over toilet paper as if it was in short supply when it wasn't, when actually there was plenty of toilet paper. So that really exposed some challenges in supply and demand and in logistics. We also saw, though, companies like Amazon, they reacted quickly. They hired more, they made adjustments, they prioritized in a different way, they changed their fundamental approach. And that was really an optimistic story where they were very reactive and very adaptable so that the most important goods could get to consumers above and beyond other regular orders that were coming in. So, to me, that's really what's mattered. And what we've had here is this exposure of some of the brittleness and some of the lack of adaptability that's there in the world, but also within corporations. And we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Liz, you put your finger on two key things, and it reminds me of something Pat Gelsinger at VMware said maybe a year or two ago now about try to get your head around the fact that right now is the slowest things will be changing for the rest of your life. Everything's on accelerating curves. And you've mentioned two, I think, key competencies for that. One is tightening the time scale of your feedback loop. An annual plan, a quarterly plan, even a monthly plan. When I joined Salesforce, someone said, realize you're joining a company with a 12-quarter year, where we were putting the emphasis on the idea that we do a cadence of updating indicators and adjusting behavior monthly that most people aspire to do quarterly. But to do the things that have been necessary for the last 2 months has been more like a weekly or even daily. It's running a Fortune 500 company on a Scrum model with a daily stand-up of what are we doing today. So tightening that feedback loop, but also being prepared to be informed by and have your behavior changed by data. I think so much of IT for the last few decades has been we generate data as a byproduct of what we're doing, and we use it to confirm what we had planned and to validate our plans. And I think you're saying that people need to really loosen up and be ready to have data gathered with a real-time character that they may not have before, alter their behavior in a real-time way, which most organizations don't do.
Absolutely. And even thinking about different ways you might get data, like with the rise of the cloud, we've long talked about how you can benefit from the power of many. I remember several years ago, there was a paint contamination going on in China, and there was a SaaS company out there called Aravo at the time. They've since been acquired, where because they had this visibility across all customers at one time, they could actually alert people and make suggestions of where they might try to get paint from in the interim. We've seen something similar. I was talking with a manufacturing cloud corporation a few days ago, and they mentioned that the way they can look at aggregate customer data, they could see patterns around the globe of who was shutting down and how quickly things were shutting down to a pretty granular level. So, to me, yes, it highlights why data is so important, but also thinking about cloud, which in the world of technology has been such a hot trend. There are different ways that companies can think about data. And for me, with the clients that I work with who are often in the CIO office or the CIO himself or herself, oftentimes it's so much about their own corporate data, their own customer data, and they don't do as great of a job incorporating those broader pieces of data, like, maybe if all of these other companies all over the world are having shortages in paint or logistics challenges, maybe I should actually be looking at that now, even though it hasn't really hit my data supply yet. So that's another element that I see is just more exposed. It's not like people didn't already know about external data, but it really highlights how external data can help you get ahead of some of the things that might be about to hit.
That is another side effect of what used to be expensive, which is looking at external data used to be much more costly than looking at the internal data. There was a natural street light effect. I'm looking for my keys under the street light because that's where the light is good, even though I know I actually dropped them up the road. The opportunity to be more externally informed, and not just informed, but externally changed, to build feedback loops that really are much more comprehensive than they used to be. This must be something that you have to push pretty hard to get companies to do, because Moore's Law makes it very easy to go from an annual to a quarterly to a daily close on your financial books. And that looks like a figure of merit for your IT. And you can say, doing the wrong thing, better, faster, cheaper, is actually not a good idea. You actually need to ask yourself, what's the new right thing?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one common phrase we use here at Forrester is everybody actually has tons of data. Like having access to the data isn't the problem. It's how do you get the right insights and how do you act more intelligently about the data. And like you said, finding the keys under the streetlight, or the old expression, finding the needle in the haystack.
Yeah.
That's really where the challenge lies for companies. And for too many companies, they haven't really formulated a strategy around that. So they've got data, they've got historical data, they've got external data, they've got a lot of corporate data, perhaps not real time, but daily or weekly with some regular cadence. And they don't know how to make the best value out of it. And, a lot of times this is also in the world of technology, which is where I spend all of my time. This is also an opportunity to learn from others. I think a lot of companies historically, they were locked down. They don't want to learn from others. They feel that everything, even their approach to data, is the secret sauce of what they do. You even have companies, they want to build their own ERP systems. But in reality, when you can lean on others and learn from, everybody can benefit. And it's not going to necessarily be a competitive advantage or reveal your secrets. You may actually gain and survive because you're able to collaborate more with other companies, even your own competitors.
Liz, one of the things that at least 24 CIOs have said to me in the last 2 months is these things that I've been trying to get the board to commit to doing over the next 2 years, they're now suddenly begging me to get done in the next 2 months or even 2 weeks. This acceleration of digital transformation visions and what used to be called long-range plans. Joe McKendrick at ZDNet put it very well when he said, face it, 2025 got here 60 months early. And what are the things that you would urge people to take this opportunity to accelerate? Now that you have the board's attention, now that people are actually willing to accept the idea of some internal disruption and maybe some ecosystem education and bringing your customers and partners along for the ride with you, which is not a trivial task. What are the areas where you would urge people to use that capital of emergency, as it were, and invest it in acceleration?
Yeah, in my world, it's so technology oriented that the number one thing I would encourage clients to invest in is systems modernization. Obviously, it's too late to modernize your systems to be adaptive for the pandemic that we're already midstream. You're not going to have a new operations system or a new CRM, ERP, supply chain, product lifecycle management, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the pandemic. Probably not. We hope the pandemic will soon get into that new normal. So it's kind of too late, but at the same time, it highlights that this is what was needed, and you can't predict when it was needed. So all these years of talking about digital disruption, we've been talking about that for 7 or 8 years. Most companies acknowledge, yes, we need it. But the pandemic really exposed that those companies who were on more modern systems, built for speed, built for agility, built for flexibility, easy to use, adaptable, scalable, they were better able to thrive. I mean, obviously there were external factors. So some companies, even with modern systems, just cannot overcome the external situation that they're facing. But in sectors where people are adapting or growing, we see that the ones who had modernized really fare the best. So to me, that's the number one technology need, is to get out of those legacy systems that are totally inflexible, data that's locked away, no real insights, no real AI, nothing really predictive, not able to adapt to changing situations, and that are too locked down inside the 4 walls, and getting into more systems that are collaborative with the ecosystem. Since we see so much of the world really is dependent on how you collaborate with customers, partners, and your own employees.
You did just bring up the term AI, and a lot of people are asking what its relevance is to the current situation. A year ago, I was talking about a 1983 joke that as soon as something actually works, we stop calling it AI. We call it face recognition once it recognizes the faces. And so the label of AI, and this again was a 1983 joke, it actually stands for almost implemented, because once it is implemented, it loses that label. And now what I'm hearing you and others say is, make sure that AI doesn't turn out to be automated inflexibility. Make sure you don't apply a state-of-the-art machine learning model to doing it the way you were doing it a year ago, better than ever before, when that's actually not what you want. You want adaptability rather than an old-fashioned idea of relentless optimization for minimum cost of what you don't do anymore. And that must be a challenge, because there are people who are probably saying, oh, cool, we got our machine learning model implemented a year ago. Great, now let's get starting, start getting some returns from that. And you say, no, actually applying what your machine learning model was learning in February 2019 may not be intelligent behavior at all, artificial or otherwise.
Well, that's exactly it. AI obviously isn't new at all. It's been around for decades. But when you look at the last few years, Forrester often talks about how we're moving from what we had called the age of the customer to now the age of intelligence in the technology landscape. Significant amounts of suppliers talk about something intelligent or AI. It's pretty commonplace nowadays. But what does that really mean? I mean, for most companies, yes, they acknowledge they would like to be more intelligent. However, that can take on different shapes, and it's still, for most companies, despite how many years AI has been around, it's still something that's pretty nascent, and they don't really know what to do with it. I mean, like you highlighted, the most important thing is learning, but it's also helping your employees to think differently. And something that often gets overlooked is the change management that goes along with taking advantage of these new technologies, that it will be a different way to look at the data. It will augment what you're doing, but it also requires you to think differently and to be open to these new ways of working. And that's another hurdle. Like a lot of the clients I've worked with, they don't really trust AI. So even though they're investing in it, they wouldn't really let it, let's say, take over the financial close process because they're not quite sure. So they do these sort of more baby steps, and that's why I think we're on a curve, and people will get more experience with AI. They'll see the value, and also the tools and solutions themselves will get more sophisticated. For what I see with my clients, it's easiest where it's applied to a very specific problem. Even if you look at like with IBM Watson, which came under a lot of criticism in its early years, where they've honed in and focused on something specific is where they've tended to have the greatest success. And it's also then easier to adopt because you're clear on what you're using it for. And it doesn't feel like a fishing expedition of like, well, yeah, we're going to use AI and what are we going to get out of it? We'll see, and that's, I think, where people are still struggling, a lot of them.
Liz, as we talk about the degree to which some of the changes of this will be persistent and durable change. Someone said, try to imagine what an airport looked like before 9/11. Remember, you would walk in, walk to the gate, check in at the gate, walk onto the plane. We'll never go back to that probably. And in the same way, the workplace and the university and the hospital and the government office of the future may have characteristics of scheduling arrivals, minimizing choke points in the lobbies and the elevators and so on. This entails collecting a kind of data about where you've been, who you've been with. Contact tracing creates a lot of apprehension. Are companies ready for the necessity and the obligations that come with custodianship of a kind of data that really has a sensitivity about it, that's a level or two above mere financial and other transactional data?
So from what I've seen, not really. I think most companies are trying to figure out what to do. And, it seems like not a day goes by that I don't get an email about a new solution for some kind of employee health app related to COVID. A lot of tech providers are offering them. Some are even free. A lot of services providers like Accenture, Deloitte, et cetera, they also have solutions that help with this. So there's no shortage of tools and ideas and approaches. But of course, like you bring up, there's risk, there's sensitivity, there's that work-life balance. Like, oh, I was at a concert last night before this big meeting, and maybe my employer, I wouldn't want them to know that. Of course, that wouldn't be me doing that. But,
no, you live a blameless life, I'm sure.
Yeah, totally. But, it's one of those things where companies have to learn as we go, right? They're not going to have all the answers. Just like after 9/11, we've continued to evolve. And when, you think of incidents that have happened and cropped up over the years, like I think they call them the shoe bomber,
Yes.
And we continue to evolve. So I see this being very much the same, that again, adaptability will be the most important thing. We will do the best we can with the information that we have now. We will look to leaders for ideas on what we can do. And many of those leaders will come from the technology world, but we'll also have to adapt and evolve. And over time, there will likely also be laws that start to govern who's doing what and who should retain what kind of information and how it should get out there. And, obviously as people who work in companies, you can see both sides of it. Of course, you are sensitive to your personal information, but yeah, you would also want to know if the person sitting next to you likely has COVID and
Sure.
you could be at risk there or put your own family at risk, right? So these are all, obviously very delicate issues, but ones that we will just have to continue to evolve on.
Well, you've made another key point, which is the degree to which legislation and regulation have trouble keeping up with all of this. There was an incident, I think it may have been just last year, where what was supposed to be a military black site, not on any unclassified maps, was in fact clearly visible on the public website of a fitness wearable manufacturer, because the troops doing their workouts were having their data automatically logged in a social media platform. And no one had written a rule saying you can't log in with your fitness wearable from the black site, because that was just an alien concept and the laws couldn't keep up. Are there areas in which you feel that corporations, healthcare providers, and others are going to have to anticipate and be proactive rather than waiting to be told what the rules are?
You know, I always go back to the phrase of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law.
Okay.
You know, most of us at this point have probably been through GDPR training, and at least at Forrester, how we do it, it's not only the letter of the law, it's also helping you learn the spirit of the law, because inevitably you can't plan for every scenario that's going to come up. Yeah. Now, arguably, the government could have been a little faster to react to wearables. That maybe would have been an obvious possible leak. But of course, everybody's doing a million different things, whether you're government, private sector, or just living your daily life as a person. And so to me, that's where we also want to make sure that we're thinking about teaching people the spirit so they can make better decisions and informed decisions. But we also want to be collecting feedback. So you might think that maybe one of those people using a fitness tracker had the question in their mind, should I be doing this? Okay. And having an open forum where people can share that back and maybe put an idea on the radar screen that has been overlooked. And, you know, we always talk about, as Forrester, the power of the customer, the age of the customer, how everybody does have so much power. But in situations like that, you often see it is still command and control. Obviously, that is how our military works. But, you know, looking at how you might incorporate more input from different parties so that you can actually get smarter because of it. And certain entities such as military obviously have a steeped culture that is command and control because lives are at risk and there's reasons for it. But for a lot of corporate culture, it already is open. Obviously, you and I both work for companies where we're pretty open and collaborative. Yeah. So I think companies who already have that openness and collaboration and ability to listen, obviously we've seen a great rise in these kinds of listening tools of various degrees that could be utilized to help organizations get smarter. I know at Forrester, we do a lot of that. We do a lot of feedback to our executives. We have a very open culture. So if even one person spots a challenge like that or a problem, they have an opportunity to voice it.
Yeah, there's the famous poster that says, please write your suggestion in the space below, please write legibly, and it's a 1 square inch space. And that has been, you know, the counter example to really being interested. Conversely, there are the auto plants where it's famous that any worker can pull the rope and halt the line, and that there really is a culture of everyone is responsible and everyone has leverage in proportion to that responsibility. Liz, one of the reasons I continue to work with Forum year on year is that it is such a unique intersection of entrepreneurial capital, technical innovation, and, you know, the educational community in Philadelphia. It's always been such a fascinating crucible to bring these things together. When you look at that intersection of competencies and interests, what are the things that you would most want to share with that group if I have not already allowed you to do so with questions that I've asked? But what are things that you would want to be sure you put into your call to action if you were keynoting in the flesh this year?
Yeah, you know, one of the trends that we've observed is that oftentimes these periods of economic uncertainty and then recession can actually breed the most innovation. And I guess for me, being at Forum a few years ago, innovation was really a clear topic, obviously with all of the startup community being there and academia. And to me, looking at this also as an opportunity is what I think is an important message, that a lot of times, especially if you watch the news, you hear all doom and gloom. But really, if you look historically, these are opportunities. New ideas can be born. Like you already mentioned, you often can get the ear of an executive that you may not have been able to before. And so to me, it's a time when we can see some great ideas come to life and get the attention that they may not have gotten otherwise. And, you know, I try to look at the optimistic side of something like this as how can we grow through it, not just get through it, but grow through going through this. And I think for a lot of the types of companies who have been at Forum, that would be helpful. Then obviously there's a healthcare element, or at least there was a few years ago. You know, that industry has even additional special opportunities since this has really exposed some good and some bad. I mean, there actually was a lot of good. There was a lot of ability to get masks. I know your company, Salesforce, donated masks. I know that where I live, the Patriots owner, Robert Kraft, he brought masks on his private plane from China when we didn't really have the ability to get enough. So you saw a lot of creativity, and actually rules were relaxed. Like one client that I was working with who is government, because of the emergency, they were able to bring in technologies they never would have been able to bring. So that would be my, kind of my key advice is look at this as an opportunity, not only to correct things that you should have done, namely digitize and create adaptability within the whole enterprise, but also look at it as an opportunity for that innovation and for those new ideas. And it's not only for the sake of getting the innovation, but also for getting comfortable and getting your teams and employees comfortable with being really bold in the way that they innovate, because sometimes just having that process and culture is as important as any one idea itself. And this is a way that we could set up for better opportunities in the future.
Yes. The phrase one sometimes hears is you'd better get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or if you haven't done anything today that makes you uncomfortable or makes someone else mad, you're probably doing it wrong.
That's right.
I'm Peter Coffey with Salesforce, and I've been joined today by Liz Herbert with Forrester, returning to us after too long a 3-year absence from Forum. And Liz, it was so generous of you to make the time for this conversation today. I can only imagine that, like most of us, people have discovered that now that you're not on planes, you are available for 3 times as much interaction with customers and team members and other stakeholders. Thank you for making time for us this year at Forum.
Thank you for watching Forum On Demand.
We hope you're enjoying and learning more about our demo pit folks. Here's more of what they wanted to share with us.
All my life, people have always given me critique and feedback that I've always been just kind of like very, very focused at what I do. Whether it be, doing Taekwondo when I was super young, or kind of like today, basically doing engineering and building out my company. I'm just laser focused on accomplishing a goal.
So I spent the majority of my career at one of the original fintech companies in the industry, a company called SEI Investments. And I learned a lot there, started a lot of businesses there. And I thought that at AIX had a chance to do something as incredible for a different part of the industry that SEI did for the wealth management industry.
I'm most passionate, I would say, almost about people, in the sense of the thing that I think makes me tick is I really enjoy getting people to come together for some common purpose and then driving some value. And that's really, building high performing teams and solving really complex solutions and problems. Those are the things that really make me tick at night. I love seeing people come together and solve problems.
I was born and raised in New Jersey, had working experiences in both New York City and Philadelphia. And personally, I love the suburbs. I've never been a big city and wanting to live in a big city as much as I enjoy working there and traveling to there. And it's a great culture, access to nature, access to family, of course, keeps me where I am.
I'm speaking with you today from the west end of Puerto Rico, a town called Rincon. And I'm here because my wife is from Puerto Rico and both of our kids are born here. And we spent a lot of time in Puerto Rico and actually run the business partially from Puerto Rico but mostly from Philadelphia.
Actually, some of the images that the cup has, it's from our vacation to Cancun last year. It just has my family pictures, but I love this. It just says, all you need is love and the beach, the sun and the sand, and a drink in my hand. And I love, the time spent with my family at Cancun. It was all paid, inclusive vacation. We were there for 1 week, and I just always look forward to drinking my coffee and remember the times that we had over there. And so just brings all the memories back to me.
I would say that Staff Geek is personal for me. I have traveled this path myself. I've been in a position where I didn't particularly enjoy the work that I was doing, or just didn't mesh well with the culture at the organization. Had all the respect in the world for what they had built, but it wasn't right for me. And I know a lot of other people suffer with the same struggle. And I feel that we genuinely can live in a world where that doesn't have to be the case. Plus, there are benefits to fixing that problem on the company side as well, too. No company wants an employee that isn't engaged, because that leads to apathy. And then you don't get the kind of work quality product that you want. Nobody should have to work at a company or do a type of job that they don't really want to do. I believe that whatever it is they want to do, that company exists somewhere for which they would be the right fit. They would really enjoy the people that they work with. They would have a much better experience from top to bottom, and it would benefit both the company and the candidate. For me, that experience ended up being doing exactly this, working with awesome people like Mark and my partner Alex as well too.
The opportunity to go to Japan the first time in 1978 really broadened my perspectives. And I had always loved language, but by being able to interact with people and really learn the culture behind the language was huge. But even before I went, I had this interest in computers. My big mentors include Dr. James Slagle and Hozumi Tanaka. Dr. Slagle was my advisor for my master's degree, and he was also the blind chess champion of the world. And for a man for a vision impaired man to be able to not only be a chess champion, but to be able to deeply understand artificial intelligence was so inspiring to me.
Thank you for watching and listening. I'll see you at Forum Reimagined.
Make sure to tune in to our Forum Keynote series in October for our Demo Pit company pitches. To learn more about these companies, you can log into the Forum mobile app or desktop platform and visit their company profiles. If you haven't already downloaded the app, hold your smartphone camera up to this QR code or search for Packed Events in the App Store. Once downloaded, join the Forum community within the app using the code 20Forum20.